The young pilot was panicking. Engine failure, I can't land. Everyone in the control tower scrambled for solutions, but the 78-year-old flight instructor stayed calm. Because years ago, he had faced the same malfunction under much more dangerous conditions and made it home alone. Hello, and welcome to The Last Stand. Before we tell today's story, let me ask you something. Have you ever known a pilot? Maybe your father, grandfather, or a friend who worked in aviation? Share with us in the comments, because today's story isn't just about flying. This is the story of a 78-year-old man's secret he kept for 55 years. This is the story of experience that saved a young pilot's life, and this is the story of why some heroes choose to stay silent. If you believe that real hero stories deserve to be told, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because we bring you powerful stories like this every day. Now, let's begin this extraordinary tale. Robert Bob Turner had been a flight instructor at Pine Ridge Regional Airport for 23 years. At 78, with gray hair and blue eyes, he was a quiet man from Montana. Every morning at 6, he'd arrive at the airport, check the aircraft, and review the day's lesson schedule. Pine Ridge was a small town. 8,000 people in northern Montana, near the Canadian border. The airport was small too. 2 runways, 1 control tower, 6 hangars. Mostly private aircraft owners, crop dusters, and young people wanting to learn to fly. Bob had qualities people didn't notice. He moved with military precision. His steps were measured, posture straight, shoulders set. When checking aircraft, his eyes examined not just engines and wings, but much more detailed systems. Avionics, fuel lines, hydraulic connections, electrical panels. As if he knew far more than he let on. And strangest of all, before every flight, he'd stare at the sky for long periods, as if calculating something. Wind direction, cloud formations, visibility, pressure changes. But he evaluated these not with basic meteorology knowledge, but with much more experienced, much more careful eyes. Despite working at Pine Ridge for 23 years, little was known about Bob. He was married, his wife Margaret had passed in 2011, no children. He lived alone in a small farmhouse outside town. But Bob's habits were remarkable. Every morning when he arrived, his first task was systematically checking the hangars, not just aircraft, but the surroundings too, as if conducting security assessments. In flight lessons, he taught students not just basic piloting, but much more advanced skills. Emergency procedures, instrument flying, weather navigation. Young pilots would wonder, Mr. Turner, this is commercial pilot level stuff. We're just flying for fun. Bob always gave the same answer. Nothing in the air is routine. Every flight is serious business. His most notable habit was radio traffic. Pine Ridge was a small airport with little traffic, but Bob kept the radio on constantly. Not just local traffic, but long-distance communications too. It seemed like second nature. Bob also had other peculiar behaviors. In his basement were old aviation magazines from the 1960s and 70s. Military aircraft, fighter jets, technical articles. He'd never explained why he kept them. One of Bob's favorite students was 24-year-old Jason Miller. Jason wanted to become a pilot after college. He was enthusiastic, talented, but inexperienced. Mr. Turner, Jason had asked one day, where did you learn to fly? How do you know so much detail? Bob had hesitated. You learn over the years, was all he said. But Jason's curiosity continued. He'd seen those old aviation magazines in Bob's basement. 1960s, 70s, very old. All featuring military aircraft. F-4 Phantoms, F-105 Thunder Chiefs, F-111s. Mr. Turner, why do you keep these magazines? Memories of the past, Bob had said. But Jason noticed the expression in Bob's eyes when he looked at those magazines. Not nostalgia, something more. Longing or pain. Jason had once seen an old photo on Bob's wall while eating dinner there. Young Bob in military uniform, standing in front of an aircraft. But the photo was so old, details were unclear. Mr. Turner, where was this photo taken? Bob had looked at the photo, then quickly changed the subject. The past should stay in the past, Jason. Focus on now. Bob had other strange habits. Every October 14th, at 3 in the afternoon, he'd go to the quietest corner of the airport. There, behind the old hangar, he'd sit alone. For 30 minutes, he'd stare at the sky. Jason had seen this several times. Once he'd approached and asked, "Mr. Turner, is everything all right?" Bob had turned his head. His eyes were moist. "Not a good day, Jason. Let's talk tomorrow." Jason had wondered, what was special about October 14th? He'd researched but found nothing. Was it related to the Vietnam War, the Korean War, or something else? Another strange behavior was weather reports. Bob followed weather reports obsessively. Not just local weather, but regional, national, even international weather patterns. "Why, Mr. Turner?" Jason had asked one day. "A pilot must always be prepared," Bob had said. "Weather can be your greatest friend or your greatest enemy." There was deeper meaning behind these words. Jason sensed it but couldn't learn more about Bob's past. March 15th, 2024, Friday morning. Bob had arrived early as usual. He'd checked weather reports. Montana had spring winds, visibility was good. Jason had a scheduled flight lesson that morning. They'd practice cross-country navigation in a Cessna 172, fly to Helena and back. "Ready, Jason?" Bob asked. "Ready, Mr. Turner. Perfect weather today." Bob looked at the sky. "Weather is never perfect, Jason. Always be careful." They conducted pre-flight checks. Bob was meticulous as always. He checked every control surface, measured engine oil, calculated fuel quantity. "Mr. Turner," Jason said, "you check like military style. Is this much detail necessary for a private aircraft?" Bob stopped. "Jason, an aircraft is an aircraft. Whether it's a Cessna or something else, you must show respect." They boarded the aircraft. Bob sat in the co-pilot seat. Jason was in the pilot seat. They started engines, completed radio checks. Pine Ridge ground, Cessna 172, November 478, Delta, Foxtrot, taxi for departure. Cessna 8, Delta, Foxtrot, taxi to runway 9, wind 90 at 8 knots. Takeoff was normal. Jason was becoming a good pilot. Thanks to Bob's training, he flew confidently but carefully. Flying toward Helena, Bob was quiet. He listened to radio traffic, monitored weather. Jason noticed Bob wasn't just listening, he was analyzing. "Mr. Turner, what do you think Helena approach will be like?" "Watch the wind patterns, Jason. Mountains might cause turbulence. You'll need to stay stable on approach." 30 minutes later, they reached Helena vicinity. They contacted approach control. "Helena approach. Cessna November 478, Delta, Foxtrot, 15 miles southeast. Landing Helena." Cessna 8, Delta, Foxtrot, Helena approach. Squawk 4,521. Fly heading 320. Descend and maintain 6,000. Jason set the transponder, changed heading. But something was wrong. The engine sound had changed. "Mr. Turner," Jason said anxiously, "something's wrong with the engine." Bob listened carefully. The engine was indeed running rough. There was RPM fluctuation. "Check engine instruments, Jason." Jason looked. Oil pressure dropping. Cylinder head temperature rising. "Mr. Turner, we might have engine failure." That's when everything changed. Helena approach, Cessna 8, Delta, Foxtrot, declaring emergency. Engine problems, requesting immediate vectors to nearest suitable airport. The controller in Helena Tower sounded the alarm. Emergency procedures began. Cessna 8, Delta, Foxtrot, understand emergency. Nearest suitable airport is Helena Regional, 12 o'clock, 8 miles. Fly heading 320, descend to 5,000 as required. Jason began to panic. "Mr. Turner, we're losing engine power." "What do we do?" Bob transformed completely, his calm, control, authority, as if a switch had been flipped. "Jason, give me the controls." "But Mr. Turner, give me the controls." Now, Bob took control. Immediately, he optimized engine power, leaned the mixture, adjusted propeller pitch. Helena approach, Cessna 8 Delta Foxtrot, requesting direct to Helena, engine power severely limited, need assistance. Cessna 8 Delta Foxtrot, cleared direct Helena, descend pilot's discretion, crash rescue equipment standing by. Jason watched Bob in amazement. Who was this man? Bob maintained the aircraft at perfect glide ratio. He'd optimized airspeed. He was getting maximum efficiency from every engine stroke. Jason, watch carefully. This is real emergency procedures. Approaching Helena Airport, Bob's skills were extraordinary. Wind correction, altitude management, speed control. Everything was perfectly timed. Mr. Turner, Jason said admiringly, you've done this before. Bob paused briefly. Yes, Jason. I have. On final approach, the engine failed completely. Bob made a dead stick landing. Perfect touchdown on the runway. Emergency vehicles stood ready. When they got out of the aircraft, Jason was still in shock. Mr. Fruth, whatfruthers.com. Turner, how is this possible? You're not a normal flight instructor. Bob looked at him. The secret he'd kept for 55 years could no longer be hidden. Jason, it's a long story. While waiting for engine repair in Helena, Jason fired off questions. Mr. Turner, how do you know these emergency procedures? How did you make that dead stick landing so perfectly? Bob was quiet for a long time. Then he answered, Jason, I graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1962. Jason's mouth fell open. Air Force Academy? You were an Air Force pilot? Yes, Jason. I was an F-4 Phantom pilot. F-4 Phantom. You flew that legendary fighter jet? Bob nodded. Active duty from 1962 to 1969. 347 mission hours. Jason's mind reeled. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you hide it? Bob closed his eyes. Because, Jason, some memories are too heavy to carry. That evening at Bob's house, Bob began telling his story for the first time. Jason, in 1962, I was 22 years old. Fresh graduate from the Air Force Academy. I'd trained to be a fighter pilot at MacDill Air Force Base. What time period, Mr. Turner? The most tense period of the Cold War, Jason. Cuban Missile Crisis. Berlin Wall. Tension with the Soviet Union was at maximum. Bob pulled out an old photo album. Inside were black and white photos from the 1960s. Young Bob, with F-4 Phantoms, with pilot friends. Who's this, Mr. Turner? Jason pointed to one photo. A young pilot stood next to Bob. Bob's face changed. That was Eddie Williams. He was my wingman. Wingman. Fighter pilots fly in pairs, Jason. Lead pilot and wingman. Eddie was my closest friend. We flew 73 missions together. Bob stared at the photo for a long time. Eddie was 23 years old, from Chicago. His wife was pregnant. They were having their first child. Jason noticed the pain in Bob's eyes. Mr. Turner, what happened to Eddie? Bob closed the album. That's a story for another day, Jason. The next day, Jason returned. His curiosity had grown even more. Mr. Turner, what were you doing back then? Bob continued his story. We served in the 23rd Fighter Squadron. MacDill Air Force Base, Florida. Our missions were classified. What kind of missions? Reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, monitoring Soviet activities. We were 90 miles from Cuba, Jason. In those days, we were on the edge of war every day. Bob showed old squadron photos, 12 young pilots in front of F-4 Phantoms. Most of these are gone now. Some in combat, some from old age. Maybe 2 or 3 of us left. What was squadron life like? Tight brotherhood, Jason. Pilots are bound to each other like family. Because on every mission, you entrust your life to each other. Bob's voice trembled. Eddie and I, we were like brothers. We shared everything. Dreams, fears, future plans. Where did Eddie's wife live? Chicago suburbs. Her name was Linda. Eddie would call her every weekend. Long-distance calls were expensive then, but Eddie never cared. October 14th, 1962, Bob said. Jason understood. This was October 14th, the day Bob spent quietly every year. What happened that day, Mr. Turner? Bob took a breath. We had a reconnaissance mission. We needed to photograph Cuba's northern coast, Soviet missile installations. You and Eddie together? Yes, I was lead, Eddie was wingman, standard formation. Altitude 0 feet, speed Mach 1.8. Bob's hands shook. The mission briefing classified risk level as maximum. Soviet SAM sites active, MiG fighters on patrol. Did you go? We went, Jason. Because orders are orders. National security depended on that intelligence. Bob pulled out a document from the photo album dated October 14th, 1962. It was a mission report. Takeoff 600 hours. Weather clear. Destination: Northern Cuba Reconnaissance Corridor. Jason examined the document. Classification stamps, coordinates, technical details. This is a real military document. Yes, Jason. I've kept it for 55 years. When we entered Cuban airspace, Bob continued, there were radar contacts, Soviet fighters. What did you do? We followed protocol. Maintain altitude, maximum speed, complete mission objective. Bob's voice grew quieter. Photography was successful. We documented missile sites. But on the return route, problems started. What kind of problems? SAM launch, surface-to-air missile. It targeted Eddie's aircraft. Jason held his breath. What happened to Eddie? Bob closed his eyes. I gave warning. Brake left. SAM launch. But it was too late. Silence fell. Tears came to Bob's eyes. The missile hit Eddie's aircraft. Immediate explosion. No parachute. No radio contact. Did Eddie die? Bob nodded. Instantly. I returned alone. I lost my 23-year-old best friend out there. Jason listened quietly. Now he understood why October 14th was special. After that day, Bob said, nothing was ever the same. Why, Mr. Turner? Because, Jason, I thought I could have prevented Eddie's death. I could have given faster warning. We could have taken a different route. But that wasn't your fault. Survivor's guilt, Jason. Pilots know this well. Your friend dies, you live. Why? I've been asking myself that question for 55 years. Bob continued. I visited Linda. I went to Chicago. I gave a pregnant wife the news of her husband's death. What did you tell her? I couldn't tell the truth. It was a classified mission. I just said, training accident. I said, he died a hero. Bob's voice broke. Linda gave birth to Eddie's baby boy. She named him Eddie Williams Jr. Did you see them again? No, Jason. It was too painful. Every time I looked at Linda, I saw Eddie. Every time I looked at the baby, I saw Eddie's lost future. In 1969, I left the military, Bob said. 7 years Air Force service. Officially honorable discharge. Why did you leave? Combat stress, Jason. Back then, there was no term for PTSD. They just called it combat fatigue. Bob showed old medical records. 1969 Air Force Psychological Evaluation. Recommendation: medical discharge, pilot fitness, questionable, emotional stability, requires monitoring. What did you do then? I came to Montana, civilian life. Quiet life, away from everything. How did flight instruction start? Part-time job at Pine Ridge Airport in 2001. Just basic instruction, simple aircraft. Bob smiled. Ironic, isn't it? F-4 Phantom pilot teaching Cessna 172. But you didn't quit flying. No, Jason, flying was my identity. But I quit combat flying. I returned to peaceful flying. Bob went to the basement, brought up a large chest. Inside were flight gear. I used this helmet on 73 missions. He handed the old flight helmet to Jason. On the helmet was written, Capt. R. Turner. Call sign, Steel. Your call sign was Steel. Yes, because I stayed calm under pressure. Steel nerves. In the chest were also medals. Air Medal, Distinguished Flying Cross, National Defense Service Medal. Mr. Turner, these medals are important. Why did you hide them? Because, Jason, medals represent the past. I wanted to focus on the future. But the most special item was Eddie's last letter, dated October 13th, 1962. Written to Linda the day before the mission. Eddie planned to mail this, but he didn't get the chance. Jason read the letter. Eddie anticipated the baby's birth, wrote future plans, expressed his love. Did you give this letter to Linda? Bob shook his head. I couldn't, too painful, but I couldn't destroy it either. The next week, Bob received a phone call. Caller, Pentagon. Captain Turner, this is Colonel Patricia Hayes, Air Force Personnel Center. Bob was surprised. A call from the military after 55 years. Yes, ma'am. Captain Turner, We're conducting historical research on classified missions from the 1960s era. Your service record indicates participation in Cuba reconnaissance operations. Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Sir, some of those missions have been declassified. We're honoring veterans who participated in critical intelligence operations during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Bob's heart raced. What kind of honor, ma'am? Pentagon ceremony, sir. Recognition for contributions to national security. Bob was quiet. Official recognition after 55 years. Sir, are you there? Yes, ma'am. I lost my wingman on that October 14th mission. We know, sir. Lieutenant Williams. His sacrifice is also being honored posthumously. Bob's eyes filled with tears. Eddie is being honored? Yes, sir. Would you attend the ceremony to accept his medal for his family? Bob told Jason everything. Mr. Turner, this is an incredible opportunity. Eddie's family will finally learn the truth. But Jason, 55 years have passed. Linda is 78 now. Eddie Jr. is 55. They deserve the truth, Mr. Turner. Bob thought for a long time. I called the Pentagon. I asked for Linda and Eddie Jr.'s contact information. Did they give it to you? Yes. Linda still lives in the Chicago suburbs. Eddie Jr. became an airline pilot. Jason smiled. Eddie Jr. is a pilot, following his father's footsteps. Ironic, isn't it? Eddie's son became a pilot. I never saw him. Will you call them? I don't know, Jason. What would I say? Hello. I was your husband's, father's wingman. I hid the truth for 55 years. Truth is always better than lies, Mr. Turner. Bob gathered courage and called Linda. Hello, are you Mrs. Williams? I'm Captain Robert Turner. Captain Turner? I don't know. Wait, Robert Turner? Were you Eddie's? Eddie's wingman? Bob's voice trembled. Yes, ma'am. Linda was quiet. Then, 55 years, Robert. You never called for 55 years. Ma'am, I'm sorry. It was too painful. It was painful for me too, Robert. But I faced it. You ran away. Bob deserved that criticism. You're right, ma'am. I got a call from the Pentagon. Eddie's getting a posthumous medal. The Cuba mission was real. Not a training accident. Yes, ma'am. Everything was classified. I couldn't tell the truth. Robert, Eddie Jr. wants to talk to you. Eddie Jr. came to the phone. Captain Turner, I'm Eddie Williams Jr. Eddie, son, your voice sounds just like your father's. People say that. Captain Turner, I want to learn the truth about my father. Bob told everything. Mission details, Eddie's heroism, their friendship, final moments. Captain Turner, was my father a hero? Eddie was the ultimate hero, son. He gave his life for his country. Best pilot, best friend, best man I ever knew. Eddie Jr. was crying. For 55 years, I didn't know my father's real story. Son, your father would be proud. You became a pilot too. I'm a United Airlines captain, 25 years experience. Every time I fly, I think of my father. Bob smiled. Eddie's legacy continues, son. Bob went to Washington, D.C. Jason accompanied him. At the Pentagon, the ceremony hall was filled with veterans and families. Linda, Eddie Jr., and Eddie's grandchildren were there. Ladies and gentlemen, said Colonel Hayes, today we honor heroes of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Their classified missions prevented nuclear war. Bob was called to the stage. Linda and Eddie Jr. also came to the stage. Captain Robert Turner, for exceptional heroism and dedication during reconnaissance operations in October 1962, you are awarded the Air Force Commendation Medal. Then Eddie's posthumous award. First Lieutenant Edward Williams, for supreme sacrifice during classified operations, is posthumously awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Linda accepted the medal. Her husband's real recognition after 55 years. After the ceremony, Bob, Linda, and Eddie Jr. talked. Robert, Linda said, I was angry for 55 years, but now I understand. It was painful for you too. Ma'am, I think about Eddie every day, every October 14th. So do we, said Eddie Jr. Every October 14th we pray for Father. Bob pulled out Eddie's last letter. This is Eddie's last letter to you. I kept it for 55 years. Linda read the letter. Tears came. This is Eddie's handwriting. His words. He wrote this on October 13th, 1962, the day before the mission. Eddie Jr. examined the letter. Father was waiting for me, my birth. Yes, son. He was so excited about you. He talked about you constantly. Linda hugged Bob. Thank you, Robert, for bringing Eddie's real story. When they returned to Pine Ridge, Bob's story had spread. The local newspaper made it headline, "Our hero was living among us." When he arrived at the airport, a small crowd was waiting. Jason, students, airport staff, townspeople, Mr. Turner, said the airport manager. We were amazed when we learned your true identity. For 23 years, a hero was living among us. Bob was shy. I just did my job. No, sir, said Jason. You did much more. You taught us flying, life, sacrifice. The town mayor stepped forward. Mr. Turner, the town council has decided. Pine Ridge Regional Airport will now be known as the Bob Turner Flight Training Center. Bob's eyes filled with tears. This is too much. No, Mr. Turner, said the mayor. It's not even enough. Months later, Bob's life had changed. He no longer hid his past. In flight training, he taught students not just piloting, but honor, duty, and sacrifice. Eddie Jr. visited Pine Ridge. He wanted to see his father's friend, hear his story. Captain Turner, said Eddie Jr., I read the parts in Father's last letter where he talked about me. I understand the real reason he gave me the name Eddie. Your father was so excited about you, son. He talked about you every day. I want something, said Eddie Jr. I want my father's story to be told. Future generations should know, Bob thought. Maybe you're right. Maybe stories should be told. Bob was now 79 years old. He still gave flight instruction, but less. Mostly, he told young pilots about aviation history, heroism stories. Jason had become an experienced pilot, training his own students. He passed on what Bob had taught him to the new generation. Mr. Turner, Jason said one day, I want to tell you something. What is it, Jason? That emergency landing day. You didn't just save my life. You taught me what real piloting is. Courage, skill, and most importantly, responsibility. Bob smiled. You were already a good pilot, Jason. You just needed to trust yourself. But you showed me that heroism can be silent. The greatest stories are sometimes the untold stories. Bob looked at the sky. He no longer sat alone on October 14th. Jason, Eddie Jr., even Linda sometimes joined him in remembering Eddie. You know, Jason, Bob said, for 55 years I tried to forget the past. But now I understand the past isn't meant to be forgotten. It's meant to be remembered with honor. Do you still miss Eddie? Every day, son. But now I don't just feel sadness. I feel pride. He was a hero, and I'm proud to have been his friend. At the airport entrance now hung a plaque, Bob Turner Flight Training Center, in memory of Lieutenant Edward Williams. Every day, young pilots passing that plaque learn the story of two friends. Sacrifice, friendship, and silent heroism. If you enjoyed powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to The Last Stand. We continue bringing you more hero stories every day. Bob Turner still lives in Pine Ridge today. At 79, he still flies occasionally. But what he loves most is telling stories to young pilots. And every October 14th, he's no longer alone. He has people beside him who remember Eddie, because real heroes are never forgotten. Sometimes it just takes 55 years for them to be recognized.